Today was a very eventful NHL news day. Today we're looking at some news and rumors regarding teams the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the New York Rangers, and the Edmonton Oilers. We'll discuss all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here, Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here today. We're mainly going to focus on four teams. It was quite an eventful news day. Of course, we got the news that Kyle Dubas was the new president of hockey ops in Pittsburgh. Of course, his replacement in Toronto was unveiled to the public, and of course the press conference and questions for Brad Treliving and Brendan Shanahan in Toronto, so we got lots of news there. Not to mention we get some news out of the New York Rangers organization, as well as the Edmonton Oilers. That comes more in written form though, so both press conferences in Toronto and Pittsburgh today kind of left us with kind of decent amount of news, rumors, and questions for the future. So let's get started first with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Of course, we know that they introduced today Kyle Dubas as the new president of hockey operations, which is kind of caught us by a little bit by surprise. I think most people thought he would have the title of general manager, but we also know that he was having a bit of a power struggle with president of the Leafs, Brendan Shanahan. He wanted more autonomy on decisions, wanted to be paid more like a president, which just sounds like he was looking for more money than the Leafs were willing to pay, and it kind of created a bit of a power struggle. Not to mention that these guys have already had what was being reported as, a difference of opinions and a strained relationship from the past season as well. So certainly understandable that we kind of understand, I think, a little bit more now how things broke down. And of course, Kyle Dubas also made it clear in his last press conference in Toronto that he would not go anywhere else. It was either Toronto or bust kind of deal. Like, I'm either going to be the GM of the Leafs or I'm basically taking a break. Now, of course, a lot of people are giving him a lot of flack for that, calling him a variety of things, whether it be a liar or a fraud or what have you. And to be completely honest, I don't think any of that criticism is fair in Dubas's, eyes here. Like, really, yes, he did say those things, but at the same time, he said if he decided he wasn't going to be the GM in Toronto, that he was going to take a break. He was either he's going to keep working or take a break. He talked to his family, sorted out all the things that he said that he was going to, and then let the Leafs know that he did want to continue working. It was their decision. So this really kind of changes the game. The scenario he presented is not what unfolded. And the fact was he wanted to keep working. So the fact that it's not Toronto, he really shouldn't be a surprise that he went to work somewhere else, is what I'm saying here, that it was the Leafs' decision to move on from him. So I don't think any of that criticism is justified, first of all, but obviously, he was introduced to the public today as well. The news broke this morning. The timing was questionable. A lot of people thought Pittsburgh might be trying to one-up Toronto. The news broke about Kyle Dubas about a half an hour before the press conference was supposed to get started in Toronto, with Brendan Shanahan introducing Brad Treliving as a new GM and taking questions there for that press conference. But, some say maybe that's the case. Others saying at the end of the day, Pittsburgh, just like Toronto, need to get these decisions out. I know Elliot Friedman said that, they probably found out that the news was getting out and they had to hurry up and make an announcement, make it official, so to speak. But a press conference, of course, followed not long after. So, during his press conference, he made it known how he kind of went about things. Talked a lot with Sidney Crosby as well as Mike Sullivan going into the decision to take this job. It does sound like he believes heavily in their veteran leadership group with Crosby, Malcolm, Letang. Obviously talked a bit about the team and what we can expect, and it certainly sounds to me like one of the main areas he's going to focus on is goaltending. Of course, he said they're going to, when it comes to Tristan Jarry being a UFA right now, that essentially they're going to take a look at what's out there on the market for UFAs, take a look at what goalies might be available for trade, compare Tristan Jarry to that, and kind of see if it makes sense to consider bringing him back or going externally, whether it be free agency or trade, to find a replacement. I personally don't see a scenario where Jarry returns, so I think Dubas is kind of setting the stage here for a potential either UFA signing or trade. But the UFA goalie market is not overly deep. But one name you might want to watch, whether it be Pittsburgh or other teams that are looking for goaltending help that's really emerged here, will make things interesting, will be Adin Hill. Of course, he's taken the Vegas Golden Knights to the Stanley Cup final. Now, I'm sure Vegas is going to have some tough decisions to make on goaltending because they are incredibly deep at that position, and at least one of the goalies probably from Vegas is probably going to find himself on the move. But certainly you've had Laurent Brossoit, who ended up coming back from a major injury only to suffer another one after he had a good run. Adin Hill's taken over, done remarkable. Jonathan Quick is there right now as the backup. He's a pending UFA. And, of course, you still got Logan Thompson here in the mix as well. And Logan Thompson is a pretty good goaltender in his own right. Then they still have Robin Leonard, who has missed the year due to, a major surgery as well. So at the end of the day, Vegas is going to have a lot of, questions and decisions to make in goal. I do wonder if Adin Hill, like I said, I'm sure Vegas will probably, want to keep him, I would think. But they don't have a lot of cap room, and they're going to have a lot of decisions to make. And I'm sure he's going to get a lot of interest externally. So I'll be curious to see how all that kind of plays out. But that's one name to watch on the trade front. There's been a lot of talk about John Gibson being of interest. Maybe, of course, he's a Pittsburgh or a Pennsylvania product. So obviously, it might be interest for him to leave Anaheim and head back to his home state. A lot of talk in the last year or plus that he'd be interested in leaving the Ducks to go to a more winning environment. The fact he's going to be a little bit older and has, the team is rebuilding. It's going to be a while before they're competitive to the point that he'd have a chance to win the Stanley Cup. And that might be of interest to him. So regardless of who they target, that sounds like that's going to be on Dubas' high list of priorities. Now, when it comes to a GM, he did say eventually they will fill that role, but he's essentially going to be kind of like the president and interim GM for the time being, mainly because they have so much business to take care of in the short term that they're going to kind of revisit this probably in about a month or so into July once everything kind of calms down. So they'll get through, the preparations period now, which they have to look forward to get ready for the draft and free agency. Of course, they have their own players who they could possibly re-sign that are needing new deals. Those deals can be worked out sooner than later. So lots to work on. Of course, he's getting to know a brand new staff and get up to speed with everything in Pittsburgh too. So they're going to wait and hire a GM a little bit later. I know Elliot Friedman also mentioned that he's pretty confident that Jason Spezza more than likely joins Kyle Dubas in Pittsburgh, but not quite sure of the role or of if he's going to be a Penguin employee or a Fenway Sports Group employee. Technically, when Spezza resigned with the Maple Leafs, the word is that the speculation was that he still had another year in his contract, so they don't quite know how all that's going to work out. If he's going to have to get permission, will they be able to grant it, or will they going to make him wait, or how's it all going to work? We don't really know, but a lot of people think Spezza is going to follow Dubas, and I guess time will tell. We'll have to wait and see. But either way, big news in Pittsburgh. They got one piece of the puzzle in the president. Dubas did say that whoever comes in as GM is likely going to be, I would suggest that it's going to be a younger, newer to the role, an up-and-coming kind of executive with a progressive, thought process, and would have a different skill set than he does, is what he said. He wants to have somebody, maybe with some different strengths than his, play off each other better, make a good team. So at the end of the day, that's kind of what we all learned from the Dubas press conference. But when it comes to trades and moves we can make, I think goaltending is going to be a big focus for them as they kind of need to fill some holes in the other parts of the roster. But certainly I wouldn't expect anything major when it comes to their main core group. Like, obviously Crosby, Malcolm, Letang going nowheres. Some of the other spots on the team, though, certainly questionable to say the least. Now, when it comes to the New York Rangers, a couple of things. For one, there's a lot of talk not long ago that Peter Laviolette was likely going to be the head coach. Well, they still have not confirmed that, and once Nashville made it known that John Hines was being dismissed, they wanted permission to speak to him. So to me, they can't be totally sold on Laviolette if another coach popped up and they wanted permission to talk and interview them. Frank Saravalli went as far as to say that he doesn't see Laviolette as being a slam dunk at all, because they've had 6 weeks to make a decision. They have plenty of time to talk to him and make a decision and hire him, and they haven't done so. So it sounds like they're kind of stalling to see if something that they like more is available. And it sounds like John Hines might be one of those candidates. It's also speculated as well that they are going to speak to Patrick Waugh. Word is that they have not had at least no interviews with Waugh as of yet. There could have been informal discussions between Waugh and Chris Drury. That's always possible. The two know each other well. Of course, Patrick Waugh is still technically coaching with the Ramparts in the Memorial Cup. They've qualified in that tournament to go straight to the championship game, which will be in a few days' time. So once that tournament is over, then he'll be more formally available to do these things. So we'll be interested to see how this plays out. But from a coaching perspective, Hines is definitely being interviewed, was expected to be, and at this point, we don't really any longer think that Laviolette is really the front runner. As far as we know, he's still in the mix, but I think Sarah Valley's on to something, saying they've had 6 weeks to hire him and they haven't done so. So why should we think it's going to happen at this point when they're still looking at other candidates? Now, of course, speaking of New York Rangers, one of their acquisitions at the deadline, big name, Patrick Kane. He also had some big news on his future come out today. Pat Brisson, his longtime agent and one of the biggest agents in hockey, revealed today that Patrick Kane did proceed with having the hip surgery that was rumored for him that he was going to need to get back to being 100%. Now, I didn't realize what exactly the surgery he's going to need, but it was considered hip resurfacing surgery. It is a major surgery. It is the same sort of surgery that we've seen Nicholas Backstrom in Washington have. When he came back, he wasn't quite the same and did have some struggles. So I hope for Kane's sake that that's not the case. But Brisson's comments also said that Patrick Kane wishes to continue to play for, several more years, and then his doctors were confident that that would be able to happen. So clearly, they're confident he's going to make it back and play. Will he be 100%? Will he be the same player he was? I would say the odds are certainly against him, but being, the kind of guy he is and in good shape, good athlete, such a talented player, I would say he'll probably make out better than most, but it's still, a very big surgery and difficult to really say for sure how that's all going to work out. Either way, he's more than likely going to be a ways into the season before he's ready to play any hockey games. I would suspect with a 6-month recovery, technically you're looking at November to December. Wouldn't shock me if it took a little bit longer before he did actually play. So some are saying now that that might actually increase the odds that he does stay and re-sign with the New York Rangers. Given how things ended in New York last year and the fact that he's having this major surgery, would it be possible that he would sign a cheaper contract to make the numbers work cap-wise and on a short-term basis? I would suspect, knowing that he has this major surgery, the teams are not going to want to offer a longer-term deal. I would think that most likely it's going to have to be a 1-year contract, come back, show us that the surgery was effective and that you're still, the player that we think you can be, and then, get extended from there. I think that probably makes the most sense from a team perspective, which is what I think would likely end up happening. So, of course, with the Rangers, they could probably wait and sign him later if they want to kind of explore the rest of their roster, make some moves. And, of course, he could be somebody that they, that obviously they have to be cap compliant, to start the season, but then he could be placed on long-term injury reserve. So it kind of gives him a little bit of wiggle room around the cap depending on where things sit anyway. So I would think that this is going to probably increase the chances that he stays. But at the same time, they might be skeptical on the fact that it didn't work out the greatest, and now he needs to have this big surgery. How much is Chris Drury going to want to take a chance here on Patrick Kane for a second time? I know a lot of New York media were saying this is going to increase the odds of him saying, but we'll have to wait and see. It's really hard to say how things are going to go. But the big news is that he had a major surgery, but doctors seem optimistic he'll be able to come back and still be a good player. Now, the Edmonton Oilers, there's some written articles today from Edmonton media that I was taking a look at, as well as from dailyfaceoff.com and Frank Sir Valley, talking about how Kailer Yamamoto is an actual pretty solid trade or buyout candidate. He's been a very inconsistent scoring winger for them the past couple of years. At this point, he's still, if they do want to do a buyout, he's still on the younger side of things, so he's still in the RFA category. So it's only a 1/3 buyout instead of a 2/3 buyout. Doesn't have much time left on the contract. It'd be a pretty inexpensive way for them to move on. But I think before they consider that, I'm sure they're going to have some trade talks, but there will be a buyout window coming up shortly after the Stanley Cup final is completed. You get one window a few days later for buyouts, and then depending on your team and RFA business, sometimes you get a second window. But there will be a window coming up here that a lot of people think he could be one of the main names you might see on there. So will the Edmonton Oilers part ways with Kailer Yamamoto either via trade or buyout? I think it is quite likely that we're going to see that. A lot of speculation, too, that Evan Bouchard, of course, is going to be a big decision for Edmonton, that he's more likely only going to sign a short-term bridge deal, probably a 2-year deal more likely, given the fact that the Oilers really can't afford to sign him to a long-term deal because it's going to cost too much. They'll have trouble fitting him into the cap. And at the same time, unless they make other moves to find some wiggle room in the cap space, which will be challenging. But Bouchard likely going to have to do a short-term deal and then sign long-term in a couple of years when the cap is higher and they hopefully have more space. So we'll see how that works out, but that's going to be one of their key contracts that get negotiated here in the short term. We've seen how much his role increased after the trade that brought Ekholm to the Oilers and sent Tyson Barrie out the door. He's certainly playing a big role in the power play, and he's going to start racking up the points. Unfortunately for the Oilers, the contract's not going to get any cheaper, as the longer they have to wait to do a long-term deal, it should continue to improve and put up more points, and it's just going to become that much more costly. There was some speculation that could be some other trades within the blue line. I know names like Cody Ceci has been brought up as potential trade. The article I was reading suggests that there's a good chance that he's brought back, given that, yes, this was a tougher year on him, but he was battling some injuries in the year before. Management and coaching staff were extremely pleased with him, so less likely that he gets moved, but we could see some other tweaks from around, the other depth on the team for sure, but certainly expect, for the most part, this team isn't going to look too much different next year. But I do wonder if they'll try it all to get out of the Jack Campbell contract in between the pipes, or are they going to be stuck and just hope he bounces back, because that was a deal that certainly did not work out here too much. And one name in the rumor mill for the Oilers to possibly chase as a UFA would be Patrick Kane's longtime running mate, Jonathan Toews, former captain of the Chicago Blackhawks. There is belief that the Oilers will express interest. Of course, at this point, we don't know Jonathan Toews' plans. It didn't sound for sure that he was going to play or retire. We don't really know. Based on his comments at the end of season, sounded like he wanted to take some time and think about things. I'm sure by the time we get to the UFA window, he'll likely have a decision made. For the Oilers to have any chance at landing him, they would need him to sign, fairly cheap compared to what, him and Kane were making over $10 million a piece before. Obviously, neither one of them are going to make anywhere near that now, but, he might have to sign a 1-year deal to see, might only have to be $1 to $2 million at most to see if they can squeeze that in. And, be interesting to see if they put him as the number 3 center. If he can stay healthy and play that role, that allows them to use Nugent Hopkins maybe higher in the lineup as well, which could, give them a little bit more of an offensive look, because we know they like to team up with McDavid and Draisaitl a lot. And Nugent Hopkins had a phenomenal season, but he was really quiet in the playoffs. And I do wonder if maybe putting him in a different spot in the power play in the top 6 might help get things going again. But either way, expect the Oilers to make a few changes, and those are some of the latest rumors. So when it comes to the Leafs, we heard Brad Treliving speak today, kind of give us an indication of what we might expect from the Leafs between now and the time that the draft rolls around of free agency. Certainly sounds to me that Brad Treliving is going to be making a couple of things very top priority. Number one being the combination of the Auston Matthews contract extension and the situation with Sheldon Keefe. It sounds like he's going to be meeting with Sheldon fairly quick here and making a decision in short order based on what Elliot Friedman had said before and based on his past. And he even referenced this in his remarks today, saying that when he first started in Calgary, again, Bob Hartley was the coach. He, talked to him, seen how everything was going, and decided to ride with him for a little bit. And things worked out. Worked out for close to 2 years before he let him go, before he felt the team needed a change. So at the end of the day, a lot of people think Sheldon Keefe is going to be the coach. I guess the big question though for him is he's got 1 year left on his contract. Are they going to extend him, or are they going to want to take a wait and see approach, which is exactly what they did with Kyle Dubas. So it'll be interesting to see how that all works out. But certainly the future of Sheldon Keefe is a top priority for Brad Treliving. And of course, like I said, the Auston Matthews contract extension sounds like he's likely going to make a trip to Arizona to spend some time and meet with Austin to see what they can't, get started, so that hopefully on July 1st, if not shortly after, they can agree to terms on a contract extension. It sounded as well that he might be very open to bringing back the core 4 players, but at the same time, I kind of got the impression that he'll do whatever he can to make this team better. But he did go on to say that when you have high-end elite level talent like they do, in the case of Auston Matthews being an elite level player and one of the top in the world at what he does, and when you have other guys that were drafted highly like Mitch Marner and William Nylander, he said those guys are hard to come by. Especially when you put all this time into drafting, developing them, and now they're at this stage of their career, just to move them for the sake of moving them is not something they're going to do. And that's something I've talked about in recent days, kind of cautioning Leaf fans that are clamoring for change here But I understand why they want change. It seems likely to me that they should make some sort of change, given how many years they've had a crack at this without getting the ultimate success or really getting all that close to it. So, at this point, would it make sense to make a change? I think it would, but you got to be careful. They're not going to do it just for the sake of doing it. These players are very, very good. And even though they haven't quite gotten the job done to win a Stanley Cup or get past round 2 in the playoffs, you got to be careful. Because if you make 1 or 2 bad moves, you can really set the team back and make it that much more difficult for them to have a chance to accomplish this in the near future at all, while these other guys are still in their prime years. So to me, Brad Treliving, I don't think it's a given he keeps all 4 of the top guys. I would not be shocked if he pulls off a trade. To me, I still think Nylander is the most likely. And I think a lot of the reasons it's going to come down to if a trade does happen is going to be how those negotiations go with Matthews and Nylander. They're both entering the final year of their contracts. Contract negotiations for an extension will take place with both players. I have no doubt about that. And if the numbers that are being asked for by the player are nowhere near what they can afford to do, and it's just too much money to handle for them, then I can see that's probably the main way we end up in a trade, unless something happens to fall on his desk that just is too good to pass up. But the other thing with Treliving is it sounds like, based on what he's done in the past, and based on his comments today, I wouldn't be shocked if he actually makes moves to try to improve the blue line and focus more on that than anything else. Obviously, they're going to have the bottom 6 and the depth pieces that are going to need addressing because they have a ton of expiring contracts and a lot of holes to be filled on their roster. But based on his history and his remarks today, I really think they're going to be looking for another top defenseman. Morgan Rielly is a heck of a good player, but if Morgan Rielly was their second best defenseman, they would be in that much better shape. So to me, I think they're probably going to be, I think that it makes a lot of sense for them to consider bringing back Luke Schenn. I know, obviously, Justin Hall likely is done. You've got guys like Brody and Giordano, which Treliving is very familiar with from their time with the Calgary Flames organization. You get Timothy Liljegren in the mix as well. And, of course, they traded for Jake McCabe as well. So they're all a different number of options there that they can put in different spots in the lineup. But I think, to me, bringing in another top D might be the most likely trade we see within the Leafs organization. Now, depending on how high of a level D we're talking about, they might have to consider moving a top forward to get that. I don't know. It really boils down to that. But to me, I think that's the impression I got for what we're going to see in Toronto. Obviously, he's going to take some time as well, like anybody else new to their job, and really analyze things, get to know the staff, and get to know the players a little bit better before they can make a decision. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure we're going to see a ton of significant change. And that, if we do, I think it could be a defenseman, and we'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, negotiations on those contracts are going to play a major role in anything that we see. That much we can say with certainty. But let me know your thoughts on all of today's activities between the Leafs, the Oilers, the Rangers, the Penguins. What rumors do you think are most interesting? Which moves do you think we're going to see out of these teams? Going to get a lot of new people and new places here. They're going to shake things up. So I'll be curious to see what we see for trades and changes going into next year. Let me know your thoughts on all of that down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.